Hi there, I'm Tom. Welcome to Tom's Grinder Lab. This is a review of the WPM ZP-1 grinder. It's a high-end single-dose grinder. This is the silver version. I was sent in exchange for the review a black version. I think I actually prefer the silver one though, because I think you see the contours a little bit better. But enough of that. Let's have a look at our agenda today. Same as always, we're going to kick off with the summary, so you don't have to scroll to the end to get to the conclusion. Then we'll dive deeper into the specs, some of the special features. We'll have a look at outwork in the grinder lab, give you a summary of what I don't like about it, which is shorter list than what I do like about it, because I like this grinder a lot. It is literally my new favorite grinder after having, I think, in excess of 45 grinders across my bench in the last 3.5 years. This is my favorite, and I'll unpack and tell you all about that and why it is. Who it's best for, it's not for everyone, but as I said, we'll dive into that as we go through it. The summary, up front, as usual, we're going to have a look at aesthetics, workflow, value, espresso, filter, and milk. So aesthetics, you get to choose whether you like the look of it or not, but for me, it's 5 beans out of 5 beans. Workflow, I'm feeling a little bit miserable. I'm only going to give it 4 out of 5 beans. There's just a tiny little couple of little things where I think maybe the ionizer could be better if you're doing 4 or 5 back-to-back grinds, but it really is pretty hard to fault it because it doesn't get much better for this in terms of workflow. No RDT required. Value, I might be stepping into some controversy here, but I'm going to award it 5 beans out of 5. Remember, this is not, is it cheap? This is value, and value, I believe, is relative to what are the other options on the marketplace. So if you look at the DF64V, which is probably about 30% less expensive, if you look at the Glom P64, which is probably another 50% on terms of the cost, then I think you're getting Glom P64 quality. Big call, I know, but I think you're getting that level of quality and precision and quality components for somewhere between the price of the DF64V and the Glom P64. So for me, it's a very, very hot, good value grinder. Espresso, definitely 5 out of 5. The stock burrs that this comes with are Kerber burrs. They're Italian made, and they are, I think, exceptional across just about every espresso range, from light through to dark. Filter, I'm going to give it 3 out of 5. It is an espresso orientated burr that comes stock. You can fit aftermarket burrs such as SSP multi-purpose if you want to get into filter. But for me, have a filter grinder, have an espresso grinder, don't go back and forward. Life's much easier. And if you need the wife approval factor, always remember it's much easier to ask for forgiveness than it is for permission. Milk, definitely 5 out of 5. So you can see why this is my new favorite grinder. I do have a filter coffee every day, but I'm not going to be using the ZP1 for that. I have other grinders for that. I have a neat espresso every day, and I have 1 milk coffee every day. And I have 3 espressos. If I have any more than that, I'm not going to be sleeping. And if I have less than that, then I'm not trying everything that I need to try from a grinder when I do review. So that's the summary, big picture, conclusion right at the front. Let's dive into some specs and key features. First thing to emphasize is the precision of the engineering and the quality of the components that have been used. Now, WPM are known for producing under white label circumstances, say the Niche Zero grinder, quality product, a range of Sunbeam coffee appliances. So they have this long established history of being a manufacturer that's really got the manufacturing process dialed in. And they also have a high quality pedigree in terms of customer service. Now, this is their first foray that I'm aware of into a very high-end coffee appliance, in this case a grinder. But by golly, they have pulled no punches on this, both in terms of the smarts that have gone into the design, as well as the precision of the engineering, and as I said, the quality used. One step removal of the top burr carrier is something you've got to see to believe. I will show you that, of course. Espresso orientated 64 Kerber burrs, which are, Kerber's a brand I hadn't heard of before, and I've had a few grinders. It's Italian. They've worked with WPM for 7 years or so in various collaborations. They are top quality espresso burrs. Super smooth. This is the smoothest dial I've ever used. Super smooth, large stepless dial, so you can dial in real precision. A brushless DC 140 watt motor. What's really important is the Newton meters, the torque of these motors, because 140 watts is around about the same as the Niche Duo, and people look at it and go, well, other grinders are 400 watts or whatever. But it's the torque that really makes the difference when you combine it with the wattage, and whether it's DC or AC or brushless or not. But this thing does have a lot of grunt to it. So you can low RPM, you can cold start, ultra light roasted beans, and I haven't had a stall with it yet. So as I mentioned, cold start, low PM, no problem. It's a quieter grinder than probably pretty much just about every grinder I've had, apart from a Legon Mini. Varia VS3 is a very quiet grinder. This is slightly quieter than the Mazda-Filos, which is widely regarded as a fairly quiet grinder. So especially once you have the lid on it. A variable RPM, 600 to 1300, has an ionizer and a whole heap of accessories. 8.5 kilos measured. This is a relatively heavy grinder for the size, 40-gram hopper. Micro safety switch prevents grinding fingers, and also the declumper that is positioned just before the exit chute also has a bar down it. Means that kids can't stick their fingers through, you know, what might otherwise be a plastic flap or something like this. This is what it looked like when I took this box. It's double box. I put this box out of the big box. Very well packed, very safe. It also came with the accessory bellows, which is something you purchase as a separate optional extra if you need it. And I'll dive into the circumstances of when you might need that in about 5 minutes. So this is what it looks like in the box. I would love for WPM to take a leaf out of the Olympia Express book, out of the Mazda-Filos book, and have this all as cardboard. That would be a step in the right direction, but it is very, very well packed and will certainly withstand a number of drops. Now, if we take everything out of the box and display it, including the optional extra bellows, which does come in a separate box if you want to order that extra, it's only, I think, from memory, about 25 or 30 US dollars. And in one circumstance that you might want to use it, it comes with a nice little manual. There's also online videos. I'll show you where they are in a moment. Now, it comes with an extra burr carrier, which you'll see here, and that's because the Keba burrs are 64.1 mil, and some of the SSP burrs are closer to 64.3 mil. So if you're using SSP burrs and you're going to do the burr swap, then you just use this little burr carrier here. The burr swap is actually pretty painless to do relative to most grinders. Other accessories that comes with a little brush, which is useful. There's the catch cup, of course. There is the clip-on magnetically attached chute. Show you that in a tickety-boo. There is a chute extension if you want to have the grinds actually exiting the chute and into the cup, just below the lip of the cup. There's also a top for the cup that you can put on the cup in conjunction with the chute, where it literally there'll be no gap between the end of the chute and the cup. Personally, I don't think you need either of them, but as I'll show you what they look like when they're attached, etc. The bellows, as I said, optional extra, about $25, $30 US, I think, at time of recording, something like that. So not particularly expensive. This is what it looks like, side-on view. I think it's a beautiful grinder. It does come with a silicone band around here, which I've dispensed with because it's very good at collecting coffee grinder dust. So it looks terrific when you get it out of the box, but after a while it looks a little bit brown. I decided to include the promotional video that WPM put together because it shows features in a way that I struggle to be as clear about as my home video studio. By the way, WPM have a long history as a pedigree quality manufacturer for companies like Niche, the Niche Zero, Sunbeam, and others. So if you haven't heard of them, yep, they've been around for quite a while. This is one of the most stunning aspects of the grinder, this gorgeous burr chamber, and this one-step removal and replacement of the upper burr carrier is just breathtaking. Magnetic catch cup, RPM dial, ionizer. Here's another view of that gorgeously smooth dial. You can run the grinder without a lid. It's got a very, very effective anti-popcorn roof or ceiling, if you like. An ionizer in the chute. It's really got everything that most of us would want in a high-end grinder. So let's have a look at the ZP1 in action in the Grinder Lab. We'll look at workflow and retention and RPM and other things. A big shout out to monastery.coffee. If you want a regular supply of superbly roasted light roasted beans, then head off to monastery.coffee. I actually have a paid subscription with them, which they send me a fortnightly bag of beans, but they also send me a little bit of a bonus extra, and I give them a shout out for that. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the Grinder Lab, the way I have it set up is I had two identical DE1 XLs at either end of the bench. I typically have two different grinders or two different burr sets that I'm comparing in between. Lazy Susan to facilitate blind taste tests, and I log the results. In this case, in the Grinder Lab, we set up the ZP1 against the DF64 Gen 2, whose espresso burrs I rate very highly, the Mazda-Filos, and one of my all-time favorites, which is the Fiorenzato Pietro hand grinder, and we use this for filter comparisons between the two. The others we use for espresso. So I've benchmarked this and blind taste tested it against a range of other grinders in order to form the opinions that I've finally arrived at. And for me, any taste comparisons, be it espresso or be it filter, has to be blind taste tested. Otherwise, a lot of unconscious bias can jump into the equation. So that's what we've done in blind taste testing the ZP1. So let's take off the upper burr carrier and just show you how amazingly simple and easy and fast it is to recalibrate or deep clean or whatever you need to do when you need to take the upper burr carrier off. No tools, just a simple push, twist, very gentle, very easy to do. When you first get the machine, it might be a little stiffer, but not much. Then 2 fingers on the inside here, and the inside collar comes off, magnets attach, goes back on, super easy, and always locks into the arrow at 6 o'clock. Next, the outer dial ring with the numbers, same deal. Magnets in this case are on the inside of the collar here, and there's a small pin, and this pin is designed to stop the burrs touching. So that goes just to the left of these 2 little teeth here you see, and around the outside, I don't know if you can see it, but there are a bunch of holes, and of course this pin goes into the appropriate hole. Now, when you and it's just so easy and so fast, and I just wish the heck some other grinder companies could learn from WPM, because this is as good as it gets. So to zero the burrs or calibrate, you're going to have the grinder off, insert the upper burr carrier back in. Again, super easy. Low RPM, turn it on, get to burr chirp, and then what RPM suggests is that you dial it back anti-clockwise 5 holes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then that pin is going to go back into the hole immediately on to the right, me looking at it, just sits in there beautifully, and that will always go back at 6 o'clock and you're good to go. I actually want a little bit more grind finding out of that, so what I do, which is a bit naughty according to the WPM people, and so I can't recommend you do this at home. I'm just going to show you what I do. Let's put the upper burr carrier back in now that we've got the outer rings off. So what I do is get it to burr chirp, and then I'm just backing it off 1 because I want to be able to grind super fine for some roasts. And again, so easy. It's just a delight to use this. This is the only grinder I've ever had where I actually enjoy removing the upper burr carrier because it's such a delight and so easy to use. And that is it. Thank you, the geniuses at WPM, for that upper burr carrier removal. Using a 20-gram dose, this is what I got out of the chute using the knocker. Leave the motor running, tap, tap, tap on the front of the knocker. I'll show you how that works in a moment, where it is in a moment. 0.4 of a gram. When I used the bellows, after I used the knocker, I got an extra 0.2 of a gram. So for me, if you're just doing a single grind and then you're going to do your espresso and maybe come back an hour later, the knocker will get you by just fine. 0.2 of a gram in a 20-gram dose. Last time I checked, is about 1%. It's not going to affect the flavor of the next cup of coffee. You won't be able to tell the difference in a blind taste test. If you're really fastidious, use the knocker. But let me show you what the chute looks like after 5 back-to-back grinds with a 20-gram dose. So using the knocker is very good. It's on the other side of this magnetic attached chute here. And it basically bangs all the extra grinds out on that side of the chute. But it's not really having a big impact on the actual chute itself. Now this, remember, is 5 back-to-back grinds. If you're doing single grinds, having a pause, etc., this doesn't accumulate the same. It's like the ionizer gets a bit overloaded, so you're going to have to brush that out if you're doing 2, 3, well, if you're doing 3 or 4 or 5 grinds in a row, for sure. But if you're going to do that, you might want to think about using the bellows, because this is the 5 back-to-back grinds, 20-gram doses each, as I said, knocker only after 5, and this is after 5 using the bellows and the knocker. So you tap, tap, tap on the knocker and then the bellows, and you can see it's pretty clean. So bottom line is, if you're doing single grinds and then you're going to have a pause of an hour before your next coffee or so, then definitely I would just be using the knocker. If you're going to be routinely banging out 4 or 5 grinds in a row, then you probably want to use the bellows. In terms of features, another little thing to note, that when you take the upper burr carrier out to do a burr swap, this little central nut here is actually reverse thread. Now, at time of recording, that is not specified in the WPM manual. I have suggested that it be included in there to avoid people doing what I did, which was to spend 10 minutes trying to get the nut out and actually tightening it up instead. So they've assured me that that will be amended for future printings. And a nice little touch here, rotate the dial anti-clockwise by 5 steps once both burrs touch. Now, I showed you how to recalibrate the upper burr carrier after a deep clean or a burr swap, but it is nice to have that reminder here. So what don't I like about this grinder? Well, there are a few things, and I'm not sure how to improve upon them, but let me show you what they are. A lot of these accessories are very good magnets for coffee grinds and for dust. So whilst they look nice out of the box, they do be aware that they will attract coffee grounds. I prefer not to use them anyway. This band, by the way, comes off the collar right at the top of the grinder, and it's nice to feel and touch as you move things around, but I don't think it's particularly necessary, and so I've just taken all these off and put them on the shelf. So that's the first thing. Small thing, I suppose. You need to be aware that if you're doing espresso and you do want to use this for filter, and you really open the dial up for filter, that you're probably going to end up with a few fragments that get stuck in the burr chamber. This is not unusual. I have a lot of other flat burr grinders that do this when you go from espresso to filter. There's a very easy fix. If you go to filter, do the grinding, and then try to move the dial back to espresso, it's probably going to jam. If it does that, it's because you've got these bean fragments here. Very easy solution. You don't have to take the thing out and clean it. You just open up the dial with the motor still running, give it a few puffs with the bellows, and problem solved, and then you can just dial back down to espresso again. One other thing I would like to see changed is we have a dial here that goes from 0, so this would therefore be 0.2, 0.4, 0.6.8, and then 1. I would just like to see that 1, 2, 3, 4 all the way around. That may cause problems at the other end of the dial when you've suddenly got, 3-digit numbers there. I'm not sure how to solve that, but that's just a personal little thing that I would like to see, because I do often find that at the espresso end of the range, and I tend to have light roast espresso, that I'm going to 0.5 and then 0.3. And while we're on the subject of the dial, I would really like to see more runway. So this, for example, is one of the Monastery very light roasted beans. You can see how bright and light it looks. And if you have a bean like that and you want to use it for espresso, which most people won't, but I do occasionally, then you're going to be probably running out of runway. It does grind for that ultra light style espresso, but I would really like to see a lot more runway here, such as I had with something like a Mazza Filos. All right, I have to say, that most 64 mil grinders that I've had, 64 mil burr grinders that I have, will run out of runway for this type of coffee bean, because it is ultra light and most people, as I said, aren't using it for espresso. But that's on my wish list. Next, this is the thing that bugs me the most. It's the RPM dial, and it's 1 to 10. Most RPM dials will give you an RPM reading, say 600 will be on the display, 800, 900, etc. But here, you kind of got to work it out. It's a 1 to 10 dial. So I did some stroboscopes tests. I won't show you those because they're pretty boring, to be honest. You're just a flashing light. And you can take a screenshot of this. Number one on the RPM dial is actually 671 RPM, right through to 10, which is exactly spot on 1300 RPM. So what I've done is I've just told myself, well, let's keep it simple. Number one, let's call that 600 RPM. Number 6 is 900 RPM. And number 9 is 1200 RPM. Now, frankly, all I use is 600 if I'm doing a filter and 1200 if I'm doing espresso, because I want a few more fines in there to give it a bit more body, particularly with those really light roasted. Otherwise, it's kind of like very, very thin. So I think you can manage this, you can work with this, but it's not ideal. And as I said, I'd like to see Gen 2 come out with an LED display that's showing you exactly what the RPM is running at. So what do I like most about this grinder? Well, as always, top of my list of priorities, the burr set, and the Kerber espresso orientated burrs really deliver, for me, in the cup, a perfect balance between body and clarity. Now, let me unpack that a little bit. If I'm using, say, a high altitude Ethiopian bean, and it's a lighter roast, I can get the layered complexity, the brightness, the right amount of acidity from these burrs. If I'm using, say, a bigger Kenyan bean and I'm wanting something that's more traditional Italian, a bit thicker, then it will deliver as that as well. So obviously it's very bean dependent, it's very basket dependent, it's very headspace dependent, but the burrs are quite flexible in terms of espresso. I mentioned the knocker on the front. This is the knocker here. You just push, 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 and it does a very good job of exiting coffee grounds from the chute. This is a side-on view. You can see the knocker there. Spring-loaded knocker. And after you've grounded coffee and you've used the knocker, this is what the chute's going to look like, because there's an ionizer on either side of that exit chute, so it's going to be quite clear if you're just doing a solo grind. This next slide will show you what the exit chute looks like without any accessories attached. If you want to put the chute extension on, pay attention here. So you can see that the silicone chute extension extends the chute to below the lip of the cup. Or if you want to, you can actually put the cap on the cup and not have the extension on the chute. And again, the grinds will actually exit the chute below the level of that cap. Another thing that I really like is the design of the catch cup. There is a lip here which fits very nice and neatly inside a 58 mil basket. Otherwise, if you have a different size basket, you're probably going to need some sort of dosing funnel. But I think this is very nicely designed. And what I do is I simply put the portafilter basket on top, tip it upside down, give it a little tap, and then remove it directly upwards. And this is what you end up with. Then you can either use your auto comb or your moon raker or your spirograph WDT tool or whatever you're using. Or if you're using a puck rake, you can simply put the dosing funnel on and then do the mixing. But it is quite neat and tidy. The other thing I like is the design of the catch cup base. I've had grinders that have been used stainless or they use chrome of some sort and can scratch very easily. But the catch cup works well. I think they've got about the right level of, wait for it, boom, magnetism for the catch cup. It's nicely done. Nice, neat, tidy on-off button, unlike some of the other grinders that have industrial style. A range of burrs. Personally, I would just start with the Kerber, the standard stock burrs. You can get the Kerber in a DLC coating. It's worth touching on the bellows because they are a design that I've never seen before, and they work incredibly well. What you've got here is you've got one-way valves so that when you're pushing the bellows down and the air has to be sucked in, instead of getting sucked in potentially from within the grinder, that air is actually getting sucked in through these inlets here. So the air can only go from the outside down into the grinder. It can't suck dust or grounds back up from within the grind chamber. Very clever and incredibly effective if you're okay with using bellows. I prefer not to use them where I don't have to, and I don't think I have to with this one. If I was grinding filter, and I was getting burr shards stuck at the filter end and I need to pump them out, then yes, I would be using the bellows, but otherwise, just for espresso, I wouldn't be using them personally. I've mentioned the dial already. It's silky smooth. It's nice and big. It's not a chintzy little thing that you get on some of the other grinders. And it's very, very easy to move around. One hand operation if you've got bigger hands. Otherwise, if you've got little hands, you're probably going to need two. WPM has created some really good little support videos. They're generally about 2 minutes on. There's an operation guide, there's a calibration guide, there's a cleaning procedure, and there's a burr change video. Just remember with the burr change, if you are going to be removing the lower burr carrier, that central bolt reverse thread. So instead of going clockwise to tighten it, clockwise is actually loosening it. Another little feature which annoys the heck out of some people, but I think it's a pretty good idea, is there is a safety micro switch here. I've just put a little frame around it here so that if you take the burr chamber off and you wander off and do something else and a kitty comes along and, you know, hits the on button, they can't just stick their fingers in there and get them ground off. That little micro switch, if you are going to be working or doing testing within the grinder, you just hold it down with a flathead screwdriver or something like that while you're doing the testing. But the big feature, the stunning feature, of course, is this toolless one-step upper burr chamber removal and reinsertion. So I put a little video together for you to celebrate that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, bang, and it's as quick and it's as easy, as simple as that. So who's the ZP1 best for? I think it's for you if you're an espresso lover and you really want an end game grinder. No question in my mind that this is one of my all-time favorite grinders for espresso. And people who appreciate clever design with the one-step upper burr chamber removal, with the ionizers. And I suppose that design also includes appreciating optimizing workflow, because you don't have to use the Ross droplet technique, the RDT, where you miss the beans because of the ionizers and because of the knocker, etc. So optimizing workflow. If you might want to filter occasionally, it's not my favorite filter grinder, but it does a good job. 3 beans out of 5 is acceptable. But if you want to finesse your filter, you're probably going to want a different grinder. If you're going to be getting into burr swapping, it makes that very easy, and there are a number of hot quality burrs such as the SSP multi-purpose burrs that fit quite well. Also the SSP espresso burr will fit. If you're obsessed with cleaning, this makes it a breeze, so you can give it a deep clean every week without any problem at all. Hope you got value out of that. Make sure you head over to Tom's Grinder Lab, where you can download my completely free espresso optimization guide at www.tomsgrinderlab.com. Thank you.